All right, hello everybody, and welcome to day 2 of the 2021 State of Medical Device Virtual Summit. This session is on implementing a global unique device identification solution, otherwise known as UDI. My name is Barrett Mueller, and I'm one of the subject matter experts here at Greenlight Guru, and I will be your moderator for today's event. Before we dive too deep into today's presentation, introduce our speakers. We've got John Lorenc and Gary Sainer from Reqm'ts. I'm going to touch on a few items really quickly. First of all, this session is about 45 minutes long and will include a Q&A session at the end. Please submit your questions throughout the presentation in the box in the right-hand side, and we will get to as many of them as time permits. This entire session will be recorded, and slides are also available for you to download. If you actually check out, we've got a little handout section, and the slides are available currently, so please download those if you want to have those. All right, so before we get into the details, I'd like to share a few words about Greenlight and why we put on this free virtual summit. So here at Greenlight, our mission is to improve the quality of life. Anything we can do as an organization that helps you bring safer, life-changing devices to market quicker and with less risk aligns with that mission, whether that's through hosting free training sessions or through our award-winning medical device quality management software. If you'd like to learn more about why medical device companies around the world are moving away from paper-based general-purpose quality management systems and adopting our purpose-built medical device quality management software, please head on over to www.greenlight.guru after today's presentation to schedule your free personalized one-on-one demonstration. All right, you guys are eager, so now on to the bulk of today's presentation, and I want to give you a proper introduction to your presenters today. First up is Gary Sainer. He is a subject matter expert on medical device, unique device identification, and other structured content reporting to regulatory agencies and commercial organizations. He has over 30 years of experience in software development, process management, and data administration, with the last 15 years focused on the life sciences industry. He serves as co-chair of the industry's structured product labeling technical team and on the advisory board of the medical device group. Now, John, who's also here as well, directs electronic submission and regulatory requirement initiatives that impact the medical device industry. He has advanced experience with machine-to-machine submission requirements to global UDI databases, including US FDA GUDID, the EU UDAMED, and China NMPA UDID. John represents Reqm'ts in membership with MedTech Europe and actively participates in electronic submission pilots to regulatory UDI databases. All right, so without much further ado, let me hand over to your presenters, John and Gary.
All right, well, thank you very much, Barrett. We're pleased to connect up with you folks and be part of this virtual meeting and seminar that you have on medical device issues and being able to supply solutions to the industry. I'm going to cover just a quick description of Reqm'ts so that you are aware of our company that John and I work for here. Reqm'ts is a company that's providing best-in-class information-based solutions and services to meet the needs of the life science industry. We also serve various government agencies, and we provide some services for the intellectual property market. So we have some history going back to 1961, over 1,000 employees. Our parent is LexisNexis, and our grandparent, if you will, is Reqm'ts Group. And one of the things that we do here at Reqm'ts is put together solutions that help manufacturers, pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturers, work with the regulatory bodies. So we're a provider of that product data management and submission solutions to over 1,000 of those particular manufacturers. And we position ourselves between the manufacturer and those downstream users of your product and information. So taking care of the regulatory requirements, the prerequisites up front, we help you make those submissions, and then also help communicate that information out to your customers for product information. There's a number of associations that we're connected with, being in the industry over these number of years. With that said, I'm going to move over to our discussion topic agenda. So we have a pretty full agenda to cover. A lot of topics that we want to touch on and share with you folks. I'll tick off the first one there with some lessons to guide your UDI approach. If you're new to that particular topic, or you're having challenges or thinking about revamping, there's some suggestions there that I'd like to share with you. And then I'm going to turn it over to John, who will take a very high level look at the timeline of all the global health authorities requirements, and then John's going to dive in and do a quick little snapshot of a number of those regional health authorities and kind of walk your way through that, and we'll save some time here at the end for Q&A. So let's get started. Let's talk about some challenges that you may have in approaching UDI, and especially having a particular slant on that to make it a global approach rather than an individual siloed approach. Now, you might relate to this particular story. This is a quick little story about a company that has a great medical device concept, created a company, and they started to work their way through the pathway to the market. They did the research and design, they did their development, they did the testing, walked their way through verification and validation, and did that regulatory approval. This particular company, let's say, also engaged Green Lake Guru and put their quality management system together in place. And they really worked their way down through this over the course of 2 years and checked every box. And the president of the company calls the department heads together and said, all right, I think we're ready for global launch. Let's take this product to the market. And their plans are to take that product and just distribute it out to all these different regional areas. And then the regulatory person at the far end of the table raises their hand and says, wait a minute, we have another checkbox. What? Yeah, we have another checkbox. It has UDI written all over it. And the energy in the room just kind of evaporates, right? And well, what is this UDI? Well, we have to come up with an identifier for our product, and we have to put it on the label of the product, have some production identifiers. And oh, by the way, for every one of those countries that you see around there, we have to put about 50 attributes together and report that to a UDI database. And guess what? They're all kind of a little bit different. And you can see the regulatory person getting a little stressed out. He's starting to pull his hair out. Everyone's overwhelmed with the fact that they spent 2 years on this development. They're ready to launch, and now they have to put the celebration plans. There's no party, and put it on hold, and start working with UDI. So we need to take a look at this, and you might relate to this particular scenario. I've talked to a number of clients who kind of have maybe not the exact same look, but there's a little bit of element of this being overwhelmed with UDI. So let's take a look at what's causing all the stress for this regulatory person. We touched on the fact that there are a number of regulatory bodies that are starting to implement UDI, and John's going to dive into that. So I'm going to move on to another pair of requirements that are happening simultaneously, growing with some momentum. And you may not have seen this yet, but there will be perhaps a point in time where you'll get some additional customer requirements about reporting electronic data related to UDI. There's a number of different areas there that we see a trend where customers are placing some requirements, getting structured information, UDI type of content. And as we here at RETEC look at some of these requirements over the years, we start to see that there are some trends, and there's a deeper technical challenge underneath these requirements. And the first four that I'll quickly mention here are all about the fact that there's minimal global harmonization. So there was this dream when UDI first was launched that there would be a single global database. Everyone would have similar, same attributes, and report to one big common database, and everyone would share it and would follow the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum guidelines. But that has not happened. And John and I have seen over the years that there's dissimilar and unclear policies when you jump from health authority to health authority. In some cases, they're incomplete and changing specs. There's certainly different data sets. So we have seen this where there might be some common attributes about your product, but for the most part, there's a number of regional elements that go into that data set, and each has their own control vocabulary. In some cases, they use some different business rules and so on about the data that they collect. And we're seeing each of these health authorities have a customized way of submitting the data. So not all the machine-to-machine connections are the same. And we have seen deadlines change, and that's not uncommon for a new requirement like this in industry. But it does cause you to reshuffle the cards on the table, where now things are moved out. Development may not have progressed as fast as planned. There's a coronavirus that you have to deal with these days, and it just really shuffles the timelines. So there is a challenge just keeping everything current and having your subject matter expertise up to date. And some clients, as they start to look around internally, they are finding that they have a challenge in that this data is in many different silos. It's all regional, and it's kind of evolved over the time as necessary to report and register devices. But now we have values that are duplicated many places, and sometimes the fields are not the same and not being updated and so on. So there's questionable quality about the data that is actually there. And layered on top of all of that, many times this UDI will have data processing, compliance requirements, and it really just starts to get overwhelming. And there's no reason why the regulatory person looks a little stressed these days. So all of this points to having a single flexible master data management approach. And before we start to get into some of the details there, let's take a look and make sure that we're building the foundation correctly. So there's 6 goals that I would suggest that you keep in mind when you embark on a UDI data management approach. The first one being that global master data source. You want to have a trusted, reliable source of the information. You want high quality there, so you need to control that information. And then related to that, a second one being a need to have this in a central repository. So you collect all the information that you need for various regulators and also your commercial trading partners. And you want to avoid the multiple silo problem where values are repeated and many times different in those silos. The third one to keep in mind is that there's a need to have expansion. So you want to have some what I refer to as incremental functionality. You want to be able to evolve this particular solution over the time and allow for acquisitions, new products that come out. You want to be able to scale this up and also be flexible for changing processing requirements. So UDI is relatively a new aspect to your medical devices, and things do change over the course of time, and you want to be able to be flexible and respond to that. The fourth one being the cost effective. So there's this particular item usually appears on sooner or later on all these goals for a particular project, but saving costs and time and resources. You want to build connections. Nowadays with technology, you're able to have electronic processing and updates. Once you have this master source of data established, then distribute it in a efficient fashion and keep every downstream user up to date automatically in a bulk fashion, submitting data to regulatory bodies and so on. And nowadays there's a trend to switch over to a software as a service hosted model. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Number 5, being regulatory compliance. This is prerequisite, obviously. One could argue this is number 1, but you want to keep these market doors open. You don't want anything closing and restricting your ability to distribute your product into regional areas, and that now starts to layer on the UDI requirements. And in parallel, having your commercial support. So you'll start to see, if you have not already seen, customers require structured electronic product information. So many times I refer to it as an electronic catalog of information about the product, being able to make sure that you stay competitive and you're leading the pack of being able to meet the needs of your customer. As you start to lay this foundation, at some point in time, you'll need to have a plan to implement UDI, and the data management of that is an integral part. So we're going to go over and touch a look at some steps here regarding an implementation. And we're not going to dive into each one of these just because of time constraints, but you want to have a UDI process preparation, have your data prepped and start cleansing the data, and then figure out a particular solution, have a method of managing that data for reporting purposes, and being able to subscribe and set up subscriptions to various downstream customers. In parallel, there's this UDI requirement for labeling. This particular new requirement might cause you to switch from a one-dimensional to two-dimensional. So there might be some issues there about technology and infrastructure. And you eventually get to the point where you've satisfied all these particular prerequisites and now moved into actual production. So some of these can happen in parallel, but you'll need to eventually consider each one of these 5 steps in your implementation. Now I want to go back to the one in the middle there about UDI data preparation. This is one of the core offerings and core matters here at ReedTech that we're familiar with. And we've identified 4 different methods of submitting data, preparing data, and transferring it over to a health authority. So the first data model, or the first submission model here, is that you embark on manual entry, log into a website, and key in the data. There's some transcription errors that you need to deal with. And this is labor intensive, and it's not scalable. So you'll have to do this for each and every health authority. So there's some concerns with that particular approach. The build approach is basically you embark on an internal development program, and that can be quite lengthy, perhaps a year and a half or so, and costly because you're building it just for yourself, and layering on capability to manage data and submit that off to the health authority. Buy is the third option. You could actually have software installed, layered on top of your internal systems, and there's ongoing subscription prices for that. The last one there is to rent, and that is a term that we use to identify participating in a hosted piece of software, using the software as a service model. And you actually share in the cost with other clients of that particular service. We won't go into this, but as you start to look at a solution, once you pick your model there and engage a particular system, there's a number of check items that you want to go through and qualify your particular approach for your scenario. And it's not one size fits all sort of thing. You're going to have to look at what fits best for you folks. I'll just touch on and wrap up here with some best practices. Make sure that you have governance over your data, that you have a master set of information. It's a single reliable source. And don't forget the maintenance and the monitoring. This thing is changing over the course of time, and you want to use that product throughout your organization and share it with your downstream users. So with that said, John, I'm going to turn it over to you to take a look at the global timeline and do a quick worldwide tour.
Sure. So thanks, Gary. And I guess let's buckle up. There's a lot going on with respect to which regions are implementing UDI initiatives. So we'll go through some past requirements and then get into some upcoming timelines, as well as some highlights on some key regions. Our slides have all this information in there. They'll be shared, and some links to the health authority specific information as well too. So folks attending who get the slides will be able to do some additional referencing. So starting off with past UDI reporting requirements, I believe we're all familiar with the US FDAs. They were first in line. So this was started back in 2014 with the classic device classification phased approach. So we can see class 3s in 2014, implantable, life-sustaining, life-supporting 2015, and then the class 2, 2016. You don't see class 1 here. Stay tuned, you'll see that coming. Then we had the NHS with the e-procurement initiative that started off in 2017 for medical device products, and that's flowing in as well with risk-based sequencing. Likewise with South Korea in 2019 coming on board with their class 4s. We have the Netherlands with the Dutch implant registry in 2020 in January of this year. And we had South Korea, their next phased mandate of class 3, that was July of this year. And then notably from an EU perspective with UDAMED, although it's not the UDI submission yet, it's a significant milestone in UDAMED going live with the first module, the actor registration module. So that's hot off the press. It's been live now for 8 days, I believe. I believe it's December 1st that launch occurred. So we're seeing progress there as well. Coming up to next year and the year beyond, there's no slowing down. We see January 2021 for the batch 1 deadline for China. We'll get into a little bit more of that later. We start having the ability to do some voluntary submissions to UDAMED for medical devices. This would be for the MDR and the legacy, the MDD. That's coinciding with the date of application hitting, I believe that may be May 26, 2021. So, and again, we'll get into more detail with UDAMED in just a bit. From South Korea, we have the next classes due. We have class 2 in July. We start seeing Saudi Arabia coming on board with their class D, their first milestone. Don't skip over Taiwan, that new one that just jumped in there, June 2021. They made some announcements recently, and then we get back into the NHS. So I almost feel like I'm at an auction, just rattling off these things because you just see how jam-packed this is. We saw the US come on live first, but this isn't slowing down. As we move into 2022, we have additional classes in Saudi Arabia. The EU IVDR date of application hits, and we expect to be able to start doing voluntary submissions for IVDRs in UDAMED of May 2022. And then the additional phasing keeps coming in from South Korea for class 1s in July. US FDA, we finally get that class 1 compliance deadline, though I believe a lot of manufacturers have been submitting some of that stuff even before the deadline as well, which I think is a good idea, especially as you see how this runway is getting jam-packed. And then we have China class 3, October 22. We're little bit of an estimate there, and then I'll get into a little bit more detail in a few minutes. And then with the roster below, there's still some ones that are, on the horizon. There's been some announcement from Singapore. I'm still waiting to see what's happening with some of these other regions. So go ahead, Gary. So now we just want to do a quick pass into these regions as to what's going on. There'll be a lot of information in the slide. I'll just highlight a few key points as we travel around. So US, okay, this one's the most mature. I guess the key point we want to hit here is class 1s are coming up. Well, they've been extended, I'm sorry, a few years, but you might still want to get these out of the way. If it's something you haven't done yet, at least get them into the database, specifically with these other regions coming online, as we saw in the previous slides. From an EU perspective, we have a lot going on. So this is part of a much bigger initiative with the MDR, IVDR, the build out of UDAMED, a very complex system that has multiple modules in there supporting regulatory requirements in the EU. So the UDI module itself is going to be released in production in May, towards the end of May of 2021, and that'll be available for voluntary usage for submissions. So that's going to be a key milestone, and then additional modules will be added thereafter, looking for the completion of at least the fully functional UDAMED being deemed ready by May of 2022. So a lot going on from an EU perspective. From China, we talked about that first batch that's that will be goes into required of January 1st of 2021. Prior to that, there was some piloting. They're batching the devices from high risk devices. It's kind of cherry picked as to which ones are due. As notice, we have question marks for the compliance timing here. There hasn't been a firm announcement as to when, for example, the remaining class 3s would be required, class 2s, class 1s, so forth. There's been some discussion, again, nothing official, that we expect perhaps it might be every 2 years. I believe the NMPA is looking to see how this first wave, this first batch went, see if any adjustments are necessary before they go ahead and make draw a firm line in the stand as when the other devices have to go in. But there's been some activity here. To me, it feels a little bit USC with the USC, I guess the term I'm coining now, with UDI, but with the amount of device attributes, a little bit different than Europe, where Europe has many more attributes, over 100 so in the basic UDI. China is a little bit closer to US with related to attributes. From South Korea, similar, I'd say, to China and the US. They do have firm deadlines. There's already been some that have passed with the class 4 and class 3s. I'd say what's unique with their database is you actually start off with device information that's in their device registration information. So you're not physically supplying all the attributes with all your submissions. You see that note there about the 15 that are already in that system or are pulled in from other systems. So you're essentially appending that information with more UDI attributes. Most of the submission activity has been with either manual entry or Excel initial upload into that database, but they're now expanding that, or have expanded that with API for machine to machine, similar to what China's offering. Okay, from Saudi Arabia, this just launched. There was some guidance released previously. The database did launch in October timeframe, and the first wave is hitting with class D devices. As of the moment, this is only a manual data entry into the Saudi database. So there's at the moment, no Excel upload for bulk information, no machine to machine. The attribute roster is about 43 attributes. Again, pretty similar to US. No structure of the basic UDI, if you will. But we're waiting off to see. Allegedly, there's going to be a spreadsheet at some point to assist with the bulk upload, machine to machine, very TBD. Okay, from From Taiwan, this is newly released information where they're starting with their rollout in 2021. Class 3 implantables. Still to be determined regarding the submission methods, getting the data into the database. But they did identify that the data that they're looking for. It's a handful of attributes there, similar to FDA again, following that model, and we'll see again what type of submission options they offer, and perhaps maybe there'll be some piloting if maybe they'll jam in there early in 2021. Singapore also had really recent notice in October, and there's links here to that notice and presentation. And again, looking to phase things out from a risk base, so from the highest risk devices first. You notice that trend mostly everywhere, and about a 2-year padding in between each. There's no actual dates yet. We just have the years were released. So there's more information that we're expecting to come out of there, with some comments on that notice, and as well as they talk about the database, but nothing about the submission methods just yet, or the attribution. Australia, we originally there was a proposal put out that very closely aligned, looked like it's mimicking the EU's approach. So even they had their dates, as you see in the compliance timing here. I think there was wording in there about ultimately kicking in a year after UDAMED. So you'll notice May 26th there, it's starting in 2021, because if you recall, UDAMED was supposed to, in the MDR itself, supposed to have date of application May 26, 2020. So that was triggering those dates there. Obviously, a lot has happened in the last year or so with the EU's timeline and UDAMED's timeline. But recently, in September, the TGA put out this consultation survey where they were soliciting some input from industry. And I'm not quite sure, but this might still be open. I think I heard that there might have been a little bit of an extension. I think the original deadline to that was some point in November. It's worth checking out if you did not participate in that. It's a good opportunity. They're soliciting information about their approach with UDI and such.
Hey, John, real quick, just want to jump in. A reminder, we got about 5 minutes left. Want to save at least for a couple of questions.
Great, thank you. So the second to last one we're going through here is with the United Arab Emirates, specifically the Emirate of Dubai. There is activity there as well. It's essentially related to sending some data over into this BrandSync database. So they don't have much more information beyond that with respect to was it completed in 2020 or is it ongoing, but we wanted to notably call that out, that there was some medical device product data being requested in that region as well. And I think at least last for now on this list is showing out the UK with the MHRA. So this is very heavily related to the end of the Brexit transition. So there will be new device registration requirements for this particular region, as notably, Great Britain will not be complying with the EU MDR IVDR. So there expect some more details coming from here. There has been discussion about adding some more of the UDI-like attribution into the registration process. But again, given the timing with the end of the Brexit transition, we're expecting to hear a lot more information coming out of this region shortly.
All right, well, thank you, John. That was a great summary, whirlwind tour, a lot to dive into there. And I apologize, with time.
Like
we're really
commercials from the 80s.
Yeah, we really are just hitting the tip of the iceberg for each one of those topics. But quick couple takeaways for this particular session. Be aware that these requirements are increasing and that they are complex. So you really do need to have some expert either internally dive into this or reach out to some external sources to make sure you understand all the requirements for your particular data or your particular product portfolio, and make sure that you master your data, put your good controls in place, make sure you can scale out to all these different activities and different region. These health authorities are coming on pretty much like a fire hose now. And there's no reason, there isn't now a reason for that regulatory person to be pulling their hair out, because this is a rather stressful time. I do want to mention before we get into Q&A that we here at RETEC do provide a solution for you. We do have a single source for medical device product and services that would help you distribute this information to submit to each of those regulatory bodies and communicate data out to your trading partners. This acts as a data hub, and it is able to connect to your particular source data and distribute and take care of all those nuances when you go to each one of those health authorities and be able to interface to your particular system. It can also act as your master source repository. So if you have questions there's a lot more information that we would love to share with you folks and help you along your way. So with all that said, you can follow some of these links. There's a website there, phone number, and so on. Barrett, I think what we ought to do right now is knock off a couple questions.
All right, so gentlemen, thank you so much. Time flies when you're having fun. So, so questions and answers. We've got a couple questions coming in. We're probably going to get to maybe one or two of those, just depending on what the answers are. But we are tracking and logging all of the questions, and we'll be sharing those with Gary and John, so they'll be following up with you guys appropriately. But love the interaction today. So first of all, Gary and John, leave it up to you who wants to answer this one. Thought this is a good one. But considering UDAMED rollout with early voluntary modules, what should manufacturers be doing now?
So let me take a quick crack at that. And John, I'm going to ask you to follow up and fill in some details. With the ability to submit data in the voluntary modules, we highly recommend that you connect up. Now, one of the options is to use RETEC and collect your data, become familiar with a particular method and system. We are able to apply those business rules based on the various data dictionaries as they roll out, and you can start cleansing the data locally inside our system. So until you can actually submit in May of next year, you can do a lot of prep work right now in preparing your system and your data, your procedures, and training your personnel and staff. Once that is now open up, we'll turn the switch on and then allow you to submit data into UDAMED. And John, please add some more details here.
Yes, so certainly being aware of the information that's out there now and what is available for you to get started. With respect to the actor module, going live, going ahead and starting to get SRNs assigned is absolutely a wise thing to do at the moment. And again, you don't want to get hit with everything that is UDI related with UDAMED too late in the game. So, getting familiar with the attribution, I believe, is very key. There was a lot of changes to the attributes or back and forth between the industry, so groups like MedTech Europe and the Commission, but that is starting to stabilize. We do have a new version draft that we're looking at of the data dictionary at the moment, but we expect that will be, once that gets locked in, that's going to be it for the voluntary period for when the module hits production in May. So I would absolutely recommend getting started. You have this opportunity to almost start at your own pace, but it's not really a license to relax and just wait until the deadlines hit. You want to start getting familiar with it, especially since you see all these other regions coming online. So you're probably going to want to know how is, if I'm selling devices in South Korea and Saudi and so forth, how's this going to intertwine with the information that I'm providing to Europe? So, take advantage of it, absolutely.
All right. I've got one more question, and we'll probably need to wrap it up after this one. But for an implantable device that is too small to include any biocompatible UDI labeling or human readable UDI compliant identification etched on the surface of the implant, can UDI be limited to electronic data stored in the implant's memory? Is that a little too technical for today?
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to resolve that one a little bit. The memory inside the implantable. So I don't know if they're referring to like an implantable chip in the implant. That's actually possible, by the way, to use RFID technology for identification. There are some requirements in the FDA and Europe, European Commission approaches it a little bit differently. So the European Commission does require that the product be identified. And this was actually a challenge. Many companies struggled with being able to identify the implant up until the time of application and insertion into the patient. So there's various methods, and maybe we can talk to that particular person offline, but being able to provide a tag or some kind of identifier so that when you're in the operating room, and remember, what's most important here is that you identify that implant to a particular patient. Many times that is serialized, it certainly has batch and lot information, and that needs to be connected up to that particular patient and recorded in the electronic health record. So that's what the agencies want to have to be accomplished. They want to make sure that downstream, if there's a recall or a particular update on that particular product, that you're able to identify it with that particular person. So there's various methods and tools to identify the implant, identify it, and then once it's in the patient, then being able to refer to that starts to bring up questions for the European region about the implant card, by the way, where you do have to have UDI on that implant card. So we'll have to reserve the full further discussion offline with that particular customer.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. I had to hit you with a little bit more technical one, but I know just small implants, it's always kind of a question around UDI compliance. So thank you for handling that one. I've got one more unique one. It'll have to be a quick answer. So do these markets also require UDI for medical devices that consist of software only, or what's known as software as a med device?
Yeah, they definitely do. So software as a medical device is in scope for the various regions that were looked at. And John, if you remember a particular exception, please shout out. But as a general answer, you do have to identify that. And the various means to apply UDI software would include, if it's, first of all, if it's delivered in a physical package, then the CD or other type of media would need to be identified with UDI on the label. But it could be delivered in electronic format, so maybe a download. In that particular case, and in addition to the fact that if it's delivered physically, the software does have to have UDI as part of its startup screen or under the help or about, and therefore identify that particular version with UDI elements for sure.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I think it's time to wrap up. Love the webinar today. Lots of great information. So for everybody else who asked questions, you just haven't gotten to them yet, we're going to be once again sending those to Gary and John so they can follow up with you because they're the experts. So, but thank you everybody for attending today, and please feel free to jump in any of the other virtual webinars that we have today. And I hope you all have a blessed rest of your week.
Thank you. Thank you, Barrett.
Thank you.
All right.